So a fairly interesting update from Games Workshop today. Chapter Approved 2022 has been announced, and Warhammer 40k is going to get new gaming seasons, where models and rules updates focus on different parts of the galaxy. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking about a rather interesting update from Games Workshop, which seems to be laying out quite a lot of the new releases over the next few months, and perhaps tells us about how 9th edition is going to unfold after that. Plenty of interesting stuff here, this new idea of seasons, a new one of these campaign expansion books, and what sounds like fairly huge changes coming in Chapter Approved 2022, between all the missions and the points being quite different. So first up, this concept of seasons of 40k content, of which Warzone Nachmund is apparently the first one, though it kind of feels like we've had similar sort of ideas going forward with things like Warzone Octarius and Warzone Charadon. The basic idea that they have is roughly every 6 months, they'll change focus to a different part of the 40k galaxy, expand the ongoing narrative for that area, release some campaign books and things going alongside it, and miniature releases are quite likely to fall in for those factions that are being focused on. It feels like they're trying to borrow the concept from computer gaming, where the game's companies release updates and patches to change up the game's rules and keep it interesting. Some stuff gets better and worse, and there's a new challenge to focus on and keep people engaged. I think perhaps in reality we're not going to see a massive change in what they're actually doing. I kind of feel like they're already going for this model at the moment, but so far they've just been phrasing it as releasing campaign books alongside the regular release of codexes. I sort of feel like this is an idea to reinvent the narrative of that, as generally the reaction to these campaign books that they've been coming out with is pretty negative. The armies who don't have their 9th edition codexes at the moment really aren't all that impressed, and for a lot of the armies that do, it's a little bit annoying to be getting supplemental content in books just after your codex has dropped. Games Workshop seems to be trying to rephrase that as a different season of gaming in 40k, very much trying to show that these are separate and completely different to the codex release schedule and aren't holding up codexes coming out. The timescale of every 6 months is interesting enough. It does seem to fit with what we've had so far from Warzone Charadon and then Warzone Octarius over this year. It looks like we're going to be going into the Nachmund sector at the start of 2022, and then presumably somewhere else after. I don't know if they're going to try and use this as an excuse to make twice-a-year chapter-approved books, which would seem a little bit too regular to me. Hopefully they'll keep on going as they have been doing, making chapter-approved around about once a year, and then just doing a digital points update of some sort on the other half. In any case, what they're coming out with on the early 2022 offering seems to be Warzone Nachmund. We'll talk about the lore in a second, but in terms of actual book releases, there'll be this Warzone Nachmund Vigilus Alone book, a fairly standard looking chapter approved, split between a Grand Tournament pack and a Munitorum Field Manual with new points updates, and a new one of their Crusade mission packs, Wars of Faith, giving you some extra content if you want to have some new missions and represent some of the most devout fighters in the galaxy. For me, out of those 3 releases, Chapter Approved is by far the most important one. That's the one that's going to change how normal missions are played, and hopefully alter the points cost for every army in the game. The other 2 seem very passable indeed, unless you really want to explore the story of this Nachmund area and the narrative that they're going forward with. At the same time as these, they're also going to be releasing miniatures, as per normal. We've already seen that big nice release Eldar vs Chaos Eldritch Omens box, which I made a video about a few days back. That certainly sounds like it could be coming alongside some decent releases for both Eldar and Chaos, but they also say that another one of their Versus Kill Team boxes is going to be coming out. No real details on that one yet. They do say that there will be 2 new kill teams in the box. We don't know whether that could be entirely new models like the Death Corps and the Commandos were, or whether it could be a reimagined existing kit with an extra upgrade frame. Some of those Eldar leaks have already hinted at things such as Harlequins or Corsairs for the Eldar. I think both of those could be really interesting choices for a kill team kit, and with the focus being on Eldar, I would be quite surprised if one of these wasn't present in that box. Should be interesting though. It's quite a fun way to add more miniatures and options into the game. It was certainly pretty nice for the Sisters of Battle to get that Novitiate squad out of a kill team box, and get the faction an entire second troops choice just out of the blue. Moving on to the books themselves, and apparently this Nachmund campaign series will be focusing on the Nachmund Gauntlet. That's the stretch of space that leads to the world of Vigilus, which is basically at the bridge between the 2 sides of the Cicatrix Maledictum and the 2 isolated halves of the Imperium. This is a relatively recent return to the same area, as Games Workshop set their Vigilus campaign series there back in 8th edition. That was the one where Chaos got quite a lot of new kits updated, things like their standard Chaos Marines and Havocs and things. Apparently the outcome of that was Abaddon the Despoiler narrowly being turned back by the Imperium, and they've already had pretty huge conflicts over the planet, I believe that Orcs and Genestealer Cult were in pretty heavy representation last time as well, though it seems that this time round the Eldar are getting involved in some form. Certainly they're absolute enemies of Chaos, but might not be too friendly to the Imperium either. In any case, the campaign book that they're coming out with will apparently have Crusade rules in it, a new Army of Renown of some sort, and a War of Faith campaign system, which I've got no idea how that's going to differ from the actual narrative book release that they've got, that Crusade mission pack. It sounds like it could potentially be a little bit light on the match play rules this time, which might not necessarily be the worst thing compared with putting the rules in codexes. The new Army of Renown could certainly be interesting though. We don't know which faction it would be from, but perhaps Chaos Space Marines, Eldar and Sisters of Battle will be the most likely candidates. Chaos and Eldar we already know are fighting in there, and there seems to be a little bit of focus on the Sisters in the other rules in the book. I'm not sure whether or not they're going to be releasing more books like this for the Nachmund sector. For the Warzone Octarius and Warzone Charadon books, they each had Book 1 written on them on the first one. This one simply calls itself Warzone Nachmund Vigilus alone, so this might be the sole installment for this Nachmund war, or we might see a follow-up book with some more factions coming in again. Finally, of course, though, we have Chapter Approved itself, and we know a fair bit about what's actually coming with this already, as they previewed those new tournament missions in their showcase event in December. The new tournament missions are going to have a whole bunch of updated secondaries that I've already covered on the channel before. Things like making Bring It Down a little bit easier to achieve, and maybe punishing vehicle armies a tiny bit. And very small expendable units, things like servitors, will be finding it a fair bit harder to do some of the easy actions like the Retrieve Data one, or score table quarters in Engage on all fronts. In general, the new secondaries largely look like they're a bit more balanced than the previous ones, and it's going to be a slightly different puzzle as to how best to satisfy them with your own army's objectives. For the missions though, I think the more interesting thing is these updated primary missions that they're coming out with. Each one seems to have a minor meaningful twist on the standard version of just set up and fight over these objectives. I believe there was one where you could gain more command points if you hold both your own and your opponent's objective, and then they also seem to have their own special mission built into the primary, where you can score a point a turn for doing certain actions, and actually try and force the players to play each mission a little bit differently to their standard setup. I think that could be pretty interesting. I certainly think that the Grand Tournament missions so far are pretty good, and these ones look like they're trying to add in a bit more flavour rather than the very simple competitive ones that we have now. And even more interesting than that, I'm really looking forward to the new points changes. I found the last Chapter Approved really quite unimpressive, given that they could have changed all sorts of points values in the game and really given 40k a good shake-up. They only really altered a few units cost, and often not quite by enough to actually make the difference as to whether or not you'd want to play the unit. I would be absolutely amazed if this Chapter Approved was less impressive than the last one, and it's always a good chance for the factions that are struggling more to get a real boost compared with their contemporaries. I guess it's always a small gripe that they don't just release these points changes as a downloadable PDF, as they do sometimes, but I guess Games Workshop wouldn't be Games Workshop if they weren't trying to sell us lots more books. It might be interesting to see how this plays around with the balanced data slate as well. That's likely to release around a similar sort of time. They said that it was going to be quarterly, so it could potentially be dropping in a similar sort of time to Chapter Approved. Hopefully that might also bring a few more fun changes too. It's certainly another way when they could help out some of the other struggling factions, say like Chaos and Guard. Overall though, I'm really looking forward to Chapter Approved. Hopefully it should shake up some of the armies at the top and give some of the ones in the midfield more of a chance. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. Is the idea of releasing 40k content in seasons around a certain war zone interesting to you? Or is it all just of passable interest until the actual codexes come out? I look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments as always. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly try and keep up with Games Workshop's news and releases, and any further changes that they're making to 40k. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.